Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Julianne Meyer, and you're watching Own Your Wellness. And I'm excited. I'm almost always excited, but I'm really excited for today's guest because I think she's really going to help you guys improve your quality of life, because I know a lot of people suffer from migraines. And she already taught me something in the few minutes we spoke before we started going live. So let me just bring her on. Her name is Dr. Tanya Paynter. Welcome to the show, Tanya.
Hi, Julie. Thank you.
So excited to have you here. As I mentioned, I think that, well, since I know you a little bit better than some people that are watching right now, I'm so excited that you're here because, talking to somebody who has experience with something that they help with makes such a huge difference. Wouldn't you say?
I really do. Yep. I now understand the jack of all trades, the master of none. And then when you really hone in on that area, like you can just dive so deep and it's so good.
Exactly. So I would love if you would share a bit about yourself and your own wellness journey.
Absolutely. So I'd have to say it all started back when I was 16. I was rear-ended in a car accident, and that kind of set off the cascade of events. I started getting pretty regular headaches from that point on, and then those progressed into daily headaches, and then that progressed into migraines. And, it was very frustrating because no matter what I tried, maybe something would help a little bit, or, I'd go to different doctors but they'd always just want to prescribe me pills. And even as a young girl, I remember refusing antibiotics because I'm like, well, my body was made to fight infections, right? So why don't I just, do some other stuff to support it? And I remember this at like 7 or 8, when I'm old enough to think like that. And so it just frustrated me that the only option that I had to treat these was just pain meds and, all these other prescriptions. Then I didn't want to do that. So then if I take it back to, fourth grade was when I wanted to go into medicine. Like I just fell in love with health at that time. And it was always, I want to be a doctor or something. But ultimately I came back to being a doctor. And, that was a very integral part of my education, was my own health. And, really having some issues with, joint pain and fatigue and brain fog and mood and my chronic headaches. And so that was a real struggle kind of getting through med school. But as I started understanding more about the human body and how it works and the biochemistry, I started kind of putting some of those pieces together, understanding how big of a role diet and gut health played in my overall health. And being very unwilling to be that gluten-free person, I was not going to do that. But then I had to for a paper for school. And lo and behold, like that actually helped significantly in how I felt. It's like, oh, this is interesting. So then I started really perking up and paying attention to how I was eating, which was usually, because I hated cooking. So it was usually jarred pastas and, like maybe not the best diet looking back on it. But it took me a long time to kind of get to where I am now as far as eating whole foods and stuff. So it really gave me a lot of empathy towards people that were starting where I was at with the frozen pizzas and the jarred, spaghetti sauce and all that, to, the struggle that I tell them all the time. It took me 6 years just going gluten and dairy free. Like that is how committed I was to that process. Right. But after that, after you make that commitment, it all started to fall into place. And then I started understanding, well, look at my hormones. How are my hormones playing a role? And that opened up a whole new world. And then I started looking at some of the inflammation and detox pathways and started working on that. And now I feel better in my mid 40s than I ever did in my 20s and 30s. So, I've definitely been through it all. I've been there. I get it. And it's a lot of work, but the rewards that you get as a result, like just not having to deal with a daily headache, to me is just amazing. It's just, I'm thankful for it every day when I wake up and I'm like, I still feel good. This is going to be another good day.
That's amazing. And I just wanted to say something really quick. The whole gluten thing, I was the same way. I was like, I think it's just, this huge fad. And
it's totally about, it's just so, I'm not going to be that person who's
I am not going to be that. I was like that too. And lo and behold, I did it because I had to do an elimination. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got a sensitivity. I'm
Dang
not,
it.
there's not allergy status, but definitely a sensitivity enough that it affects
for
me
sure.
greatly. So I can appreciate.
Yeah, and now I understand why whenever I went out and had, the burgers with the buns and maybe a beer or two, I would always pass out on the couch afterwards. And I was like, and then wake up with a pounding headache the next morning. And it wasn't because I would get drunk. I think it was more the gluten. But anyway, who knew?
Yeah, exactly. No, I hear you on that one. But something that is fascinating to me is the correlation. I mean, obviously, it's not a new concept of food helping you be healthy. Let thy food be thy medicine. I mean, it's been around for God knows how long. But it's very unusual for, at least in the Western cultures, for it to be remembered. It's kind of like an afterthought. So, can you explain a little bit more about how, maybe diet and water, for example, might, affect the migraine?
Yeah. Well, I mean, diet is huge. The top two things that I say, if we only were able to focus on two things, it would be diet and stress, gut health, and, adrenal function. And those have just as significant an impact in our migraines as it does in almost any other chronic health issue at all. So, from a dietary stand, and you hit another really big nail on the head, is hydration. Dehydration is so, and here's the thing about dehydration though. People think, well, I drink like a gallon of water a day. And you can still be dehydrated even though you're drinking that much, because if your body isn't able to absorb the water, you're essentially drinking it and then you're peeing it out. So the electrolyte balance that's going on in the body is extremely important in our hydration status. So people can be dehydrated even though they drink a ton of water because they don't have enough of the electrolytes to help them absorb that water. And so we find that when we introduce electrolyte drinks or mixes or whatever, which, electrolytes are as simple as some salt, maybe a little bit of glucose, potassium, calcium, magnesium, right? Just some of those basics. And when we put them together in our water and just do, 12 ounces of that a day is enough to really help your body absorb the rest of the water you're drinking throughout the day. So that's a really important piece for that hydration. When it comes to the diet, it really is so crucial. There is so much research about gut health and brain health, the gut-brain connection. It's a thing now. It wasn't even a thing back when I was in school. And now there's this thing called the gut-brain connection. And we're understanding that the gut is actually acting as a second brain in our body. It controls so much more than we ever thought. And so when we're eating foods that cause inflammation, disrupt our neurotransmitter production, which I can talk about in a minute, but I mean, that has a significant impact in migraines, along with, again, other chronic health issues. And then we see, the vast majority of our immune system is kind of standing guard underneath our skin and around our gut, because those are the two areas that we're most likely to be exposed to pathogens from our environment. And so then when we are eating foods, it's causing inflammation, that's causing the immune system to overreact. Now we've involved the immune system, which, if anybody's ever suffered from an autoimmune condition, they know makes you feel, imagine being sick all the time. Like you have the flu all the time because your immune system is reacting too much. So that can also be driven by food. So this is just such a huge, important piece to, chronic illness in general, migraines in particular.
Well, two things. One is I want to tell you, because you'll totally appreciate this. Whenever I'm talking to my clients about water intake, I say the same thing about, you might not be absorbing it. So I compare it to, because I live in California, I compare it to us living in a drought. Great, we got some rain, but it didn't actually go into the ground. It just went right out into the ocean. It just right on by. It's the same idea.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I just thought you'd appreciate that visual.
That's a great picture. Great mental picture. Yeah.
Yeah, because I always like to think of things in pictures. But something that I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about, because I feel like, a lot of people don't understand inflammation, and they're like, okay, it's one of those words that's thrown around a lot, and we think we know, but how would somebody even really know what inflammation is in their body? What could it possibly look like and feel like?
Yeah. So inflammation, I'll give myself as an example since I intimately know what my body feels like when it's inflamed. So one thing,
Perfect.
my brain fog is way worse. Like I just can't remember anything. So, all right, what's going on there? Number two, my muscles are so tight. So part of my self-care routine is I stretch at least once a day, usually before bed, but often throughout the day just to keep my body moving. And if I can't, I've gotten to the point now where I can touch my forehead to my knees, when they're all straight out. If I can't even touch my toes, that's a good indicator that, all right, I did something yesterday that is making me massively inflamed because my muscles will not relax. And then that manifests as, neck tension. And, if I'm not careful and I allow that to go on for too long without self-correcting, it will inevitably lead to a pretty good headache for me. So it can look like that. For some people, it can be, gaining weight, and it's not necessarily fat weight, but it can be water weight, right? Because the inflamed tissues will hold on to water and not in a good hydrating way. But so it can be that you feel like you're puffy, or that you've gained, 3 or 4 pounds overnight, those kinds of things. It can be that you're not sleeping very well. That can be a sign of inflammation. If you're constipated, or conversely, if you're having diarrhea, those can indicate some inflammation. Joint pain, muscle pain, a lot of that is all, again, inflammation. So a lot of times when I've talked to people, migraineurs that I've been helping, they can tell, like, when they start really paying attention to their good days versus their bad days, they can actually, now you actually have to have some good days to be able to do this, but they can feel what the inflammation like is for them. And it's different for everybody. But they can just feel, usually what I hear is, I just feel blah. That's always the word being used, is blah. So if you feel blah, you're probably inflamed.
I like that, because it's one of those words that kind of, because you're not sick,
Right.
like bedridden, but you're just not vibrant
don't
either.
Feel good. Yeah. No, you're just
Yeah, no, I think that that's a really good way to explain it, because I think that a lot of people, I think part of too, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, and this might be an opinion as well, more than fact, but I believe that a lot of people don't pay enough attention to their bodies and the signals that it gives them. And so therefore they end up in these situations where they are super inflamed, or, they were maybe, and because I don't get migraines myself, but maybe they could have reversed that pathway before it got to that level if they've been paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly what that's like, because that's how I was. I didn't know, like, yeah, I woke up and I had joint pain, and it just got worse and worse. And I didn't know that
Yeah.
that wasn't a good thing or wasn't normal. I didn't know that there was actually something I could do to change it. And I do want to make sure that, anybody listening doesn't take that to think, oh, well, this is all my fault. Like, I'm the reason why I have migraines. And definitely that is not at all the case. But when we learn, I say all the time, our body talks to us, but we just have to understand, first of all, that it's speaking a language that we can understand, but we have to take the time to learn it. And it's different for me than it is for you, than it is for anybody else watching. And so, but that takes a lot of intention. And I've been doing this for like 20 years now, and I'm still not great at always paying attention to what my body's telling me until I don't feel very good. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should have stopped doing whatever that was, like 2 hours ago. So, I think it's just the battle of being a person, right? But to kind of come back to your point, yes, I think that if we can start really paying attention to the signals our body is using, we can use those symptoms, that language, to understand what's going on. And that's kind of how I work with our clients, is we have them kind of track their observations. And it's just the easy stuff, like whatever, we want you to pay attention. What's your stress level been like? I don't know. It's been normal. Okay. Is that normally high or low? I don't know. I've been really busy, but I don't feel really stressed. Okay. Well, that's probably high stress. You're just used to it, so it doesn't feel that abnormal. All right, well, I'll start paying more attention to that, or, it's just those small steps. How's your pain? pain level today? What was your sleep like? Was it good, bad? Did you wake up with a migraine? And then we start to kind of compile all of those things that they're observing, and we start honing in on the problem areas, right? And so I hear so often, I did not realize how big of a factor stress was because I never really felt stressed. That was my story too. And then when they're going through the day and they're starting to pay more attention, I have had so many people tell me that when they pay attention and if they breathe deeply, when they first feel stuff happening, they actually can breathe their migraine away. Just using breath, no abortive medication, no supplements, just breathing. And that comes from just paying attention to our body and learning it. And like I said, I've been doing it for 20 years and it's still a practice, like intentional every day. And there are times when I'm not so good at it. And then there are other times when I'm better. So,
well, first of all, I just want to say, I'm so glad you said that about that it's not your fault. Because we don't want to shame anybody here. We don't want to say you did this. I mean, because things happen. But I love that you also said that it's a practice. I think it's like that with everybody and anything. And it's just something that, we get caught up in doing and instead of like listening. And I know I'm so guilty of that myself. So I just appreciate you saying that because it's just about becoming more aware. But that being said, you talked a little bit about, working with people. And I'm just curious what that would look like to what you have available. What are your offerings?
Yeah, well, so we work with women who have been struggling with migraines. Most of the women have been struggling with migraines for decades, and they typically have more migraine days than not a month, so 15 or more, sometimes daily. And then, the medication and the options that they've been offered just haven't worked for them. So we tend to get the really significant, severe cases, and our program, we work through kind of a lot of what we've talked about, right? So we know some basics that everybody needs to go through, right? We know that everybody needs to pay more attention to their body. So we start working on teaching you how to do that. We know that hydration is a big issue. So we make sure that we're doing that properly. Diet is a big issue. So we make sure everybody's doing that. So we have these things that science shows makes a big impact, kind of our foundational supportive therapies, right? So everybody goes through that 12 weeks, kind of self-paced. But during those 12 weeks, our clients have been taught what to start paying attention to, how to track symptoms, what that looks like without being obsessive about it, right? We don't want to write every minute of our day down, but we need to start paying attention to what the symptoms of our body is telling us and tracking that. And then they're giving us that information, us being me and my team. And then we're kind of compiling a picture of this person and their individual issues that they are starting to notice and the patterns we're seeing. And then we're able to hone in based on, we also get lab work and do kind of a full workup. And then with all of that information, then we start to kind of build that individual treatment plan for them. And then over the following, 3 or 4 months, we're really working on those problematic areas for them. And it's different for every person, right? It's different for everybody, whether it's hormones, neurotransmitters, genetics, detox issues, antioxidant depletion, whatever it is, we're building that picture. And it's usually 3 or 4 of them at a time, right? So, and that I think is why it's a combination of that kind of group approach and that individual approach. And we've got for our full coaching clients that have completed the program in the way that it was intended, we have an average of 91% reduction. And these are in women that have been, 15, 20, 30 migraine days a month. So this approach really works. But it is work to do, right? I mean, it's work to get those kinds of results. So,
well, when you're in enough pain,
that's right. That's where I was. Luckily, it doesn't take 6 years to get there. We can do it in 6 months, but
no, and I like that idea of understanding that it does take a little while because, like you said, most people have been dealing with it for a really long time. So to expect this microwave solution is a little
Yeah.
unrealistic. It's like,
Yeah.
it's got to be a full course meal.
And sometimes it can be. I mean, I love when we get the clients that they go through the first 3 weeks and they've been working on hydration, diet, sugar detox, movement. And then they're like, I haven't had a migraine for like 2.5 weeks now. And
That's
it's
amazing.
that is just amazing, when we get that. But unfortunately, that's not usually the results that we see. But when it is, it's like, yay,
Let's celebrate.
keep doing it. That's right. We don't have to go through all the other stuff. Now we just maintain this, all the basics, and your body will heal on its own. We just support it in the way that we can to continue moving you forward. So yeah. So it is possible. It is possible.
Yeah, I know. And I love that. My other question too is this only for the Washington State, or this can be like all over? People can just join your 12-week program from wherever?
Yes. It's nationwide. We haven't yet expanded outside of the United States, but we do support people from across country. In fact, most of our clients are from the eastern states, from New York, New Jersey, Georgia. Yeah. Well, I don't know what it is. I've learned to live in Eastern time.
As somebody who grew up in Washington State and moved to New York City, it's a lot more stressful over there.
Yeah.
A lot more stressful. That might have something to do with it. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, could be right.
Maybe. Who knows? I mean, I'm not a doctor, so but it is an observation.
That's the second thing, right? Diet and stress. Those are the two biggies. Yeah.
Exactly. The other question that I have really quickly for you, and this is just, this is for like a little dose of hope, shall we say, for people that are working with you in your program. What are some typical, are there little changes that people can see, or is it all of a sudden, bam, my migraine's gone? What can people sort of, I know everybody's different, but there's usually some sort of like, this is typical.
Yeah. So sometimes it can be, bam, my migraine's gone. I haven't had one I actually had one woman, when we figured out one of her main issues was extremely low cortisol. We got her the appropriate medication to deal with that. And overnight, her migraine stopped. She hasn't had another one since. It's been like 2 years. So, it can be that drastic, but typically what we see is it doesn't reduce in number just yet. First, what we start seeing is, well, they're not as intense and they don't last as long. And then they're responding to medications better. And then, I actually didn't have to take my triptan. I could just do the curcumin and the, white willow bark, and that took care of it. And then we start seeing, well, now it's been like 3 days and I haven't had any kind of head pain. And then now it's like my streak is 7 days and I haven't had it. So we see this gradual lessening of intensity, and then increased treatability. And then we start seeing the pain-free days expanding. That's a typical journey.
And I like that because I just think about, any sort of nutrition changes or physical activity changes. You don't see a change necessarily right away, but you can start feeling different. You can start, experiencing different emotions. And so I like that there's like little wins instead of a big shebang at the end.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a great point too, because then we always get kind of a list of the other issues, right, that we want to kind of track, like our fatigue and our joint pain and whatever else. And then we start seeing that they're reporting, I actually have more energy, or my mood's been better for a really long time, or I haven't yelled at my husband for the first time in like 25 years, So we definitely see some of those small things, and just quality of life. I was actually able to go out and enjoy a day on the playground with my kids. And even the screaming and yelling gave me a headache, but it didn't trigger a migraine. So we're looking for, the sensitivity to life goes down as well. So all of those little changes.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The sensitivity to life. It's very accurate, but it's beautiful. And on that note, it is time for us to go to a commercial. So we'll be back in just a minute. For those of you who are watching us live, I want to give you a special shout out. But as I mentioned, it is time for those darn commercials. So without further ado, we'll be back in just a moment.
Are you someone who is struggling to move forward because you suffered a loss? Maybe you're even finding it difficult to complete the most basic tasks. Are you looking for a way to start enjoying life again without feeling guilty or the resistance to do so? Spiritual life coach Sarah Stockham saw a need for people who haven't learned how to grieve without putting their entire lives on pause. And so she created a program that solves this issue called Choosing Life Right Now. This program is simple and you can do it on your own. If you are ready to learn how to feel your grief while still being able to smile, to honor the sacredness of what took place as a loss, and yet still continue to live with joy, and if you'd like to take care of your whole being with grace and love, then I'd like to invite you to experience her new program called Choosing Life Right Now. Sarah is currently offering her program for the promotional price of $77, but it won't stay at this price for long. To learn more, check out her website. The address is on the screen.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, my name is Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and today's special guest is Dr. Tanya Paynter. Let's bring her back. Welcome back.
Hi.
So, during the commercial break, I was thinking a lot about the idea of stress. And, you mentioned something a couple times that I think is so important, is that we don't necessarily realize how bad our stress is because we're so used to having it. We think that that's normal. And just because it's normal doesn't mean that, it's optimal. And
Right.
I'm just curious, what sorts of things do you think that, anybody especially people with migraines, but what are some things that people can do to lessen their stress levels?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the first things that we teach our clients is we want to do those self check-ins, and we want self check-ins to be something that is done every day. So there was like every hour, as often as you can think about it. There was an interesting study that was done, I don't even know how long ago, maybe 10 years ago. Time flies. It might be longer than that now, but they took a group of people and divided them into control group and then the experimental group. And they stressed them out by showing them super sad pictures of like, just picture horrific things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they took the control group and they put them in a functional MRI machine, and they observed what was going on in their brain, and they saw the areas that were lit up. And then they said, all right, see you guys later. Bye-bye. And they left. And then the other group came in, the experimental group, and they had them sit in the functional MRI machine for the same amount of time. But while they were in there, they were told to just check in on how their body was responding. Like, how were they feeling? They weren't
Mm-hmm.
supposed to change their breathing. They weren't supposed to do any kind of meditation. They were just supposed to check in with their body. And what they saw across the board was that everybody in the experimental group, that the areas that were lit up with associated with stress changed and went away, and they went back to a normal brain pattern. So they didn't do anything besides just be aware of how that stress was affecting their body. So we know that if we are just aware of how it's affecting us and affecting our body, then we know that that's changing how it's affecting our body. So one of the very first things that I like to do is, we all have phones, setting an alarm to go off maybe every 2 hours to get started, so you don't get so annoyed that you just silence it and move on. But often enough where it's, I know, right? I do that all the time. Or if you're in front of a computer, having like a little sticky dot in the corner, so that every time your eye goes there, that's your reminder, how's your body doing? And then you check in, how are you breathing? How are you sitting? What's your heart rate like? Is it really fast? Are you breathing really shallowly? Do you have a little bit of a headache? Like, what's going on? And that's it. That's all we're doing, is we're just checking in, because the natural, our natural response to that is, when we feel like we're hunched and we're breathing shallowly, is, okay, I want to stretch and just take a deep breath, right? And you have inadvertently just addressed the stress in that particular moment. And so the more that we can do that, then we start bringing awareness on a regular basis. So I've actually learned that I have a little muscle back here that gets tense before everything else. And if I check in on that, that's my major clue that if I don't do something, I'll probably end up with a headache at the end of the day. So I just like check into that one little muscle. No, it's doing good. That's actually really good right now, because I just had acupuncture. But, so if we find those little telltale clues as to what we're thinking, what we're noticing is a pattern that will lead to something worse later on, or will trigger something, then we can stop that before it happens. So that's one of the easiest ways, because we can't control life. I mean, some of us have to, like, sometimes we have to have that hard conversation. This is not a healthy job for you. Like, we need to look at that career and potentially change. And I've actually had some clients choose to do that. I never tell them to, but we just want to evaluate it. And, they come to the realization on their own. Yeah, I'm not happy here. This is super stressful, and this is not okay for my health. So sometimes we do have to make those hard decisions, but it can start with just, those daily check-ins, and it can make a big difference.
I like that you mentioned that that's yours, the muscle, that little muscle back there, because I know exactly what you're talking about. But for me, and for me, when I was first learning how to listen to my body, or even know myself, because I couldn't even tell what my emotions were for the longest time. That's how disconnected from myself I was. My tell that something wasn't okay was there was dishes in the sink. If I left any dishes in the sink, there's something I need to take a look at. Because I'm a neat freak. So
that's it. Like, that's perfect. Yes, something like that too.
So I love that idea of, learning what works. I mean, obviously now I don't have to do that. I mean, I've gotten better at telling things, but it takes practice. So I guess my point is, start where you are.
Yes, absolutely.
Start where you are and keep going, because
it took me so long to find that little tell, but eventually it just stood out, and okay. Yeah. And then it became easy. My check-ins went from like a full body scan to, it's good. Oh, no, it's not good. I better go take 5 minutes and go do some breathing exercises or something.
Exactly. And I like that idea too. And that, and I think what I'm hearing from you too is that it doesn't have to be like this huge process and like, okay, now I need to go stop and meditate for 3 hours.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a little, I think it's a little overwhelming to think, well, I don't have, like, I mean, sometimes 5 minutes even is precious time, right? I know
Mhm.
when I've got 14 different projects I'm working on, I can't spend 5 minutes to go to the bathroom. Like I'll just hold it, right? So, if we just think about, we don't actually have to interrupt what we're doing to make a
Mhm.
positive impact on the stress in our body. I think that suddenly opens it up to, oh, well, I can check to see how shallowly I'm breathing. And then what ends up happening, because that was initially me, like I was just checking in on how much I was breathing. And then that went from, I'm breathing pretty shallowly and actually I'm having a lot of muscle tension. I want to go stretch for a minute. So I'd get up from class and I'd go out in the hall and I'd stretch because I needed it.
Mhm.
And I mean, so it was not a conscious decision. It was just, I don't feel good. I have to do something right now. And I did
Yeah.
it. And then that just kind of started increasing to the point now where I'll get up and I'll kind of walk around my house or, go for a small walk or something, because that just helps me to totally reset. And then I find that when I come back after doing that, I'm actually 10 times more focused and effective than I was before I stopped,
Mhm.
because I was just too overwhelmed. And that breakaway just really helped me to kind of consolidate my thoughts and kind of get back into it. And I got it done in much less time. So there are a lot of
Exactly.
benefits to it, but we have to kind of reframe that idea around, time and how we're
Mhm.
spending it, so that we're choosing to spend it in the way that gives us the most return, but is also caring for ourselves in the best way possible too. And that's hard to figure out, but it's possible.
It
You can do
it
it.
is possible. Yeah, it's kind of, I used to work in an addiction rehab, and I can't even tell you how many times I'd hear somebody say, because the program is 60 days, and how many, well, I can only stay 30 because I need to go back to work. And how many
Yeah.
times I felt like saying, well, if you die, you don't have to go back to work. So maybe we need to
Yeah.
reprioritize. Maybe you have another job when you leave here after.
Yeah.
Ah!
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
anyway.
but putting yourself back to where that person was, not that
Mhm.
any of us were necessarily in addiction, but like that was me too. I mean, I think of
Yeah.
my reluctance to make that simple dietary change of trying gluten-free. Like the assignment was go gluten-free for 1 week. And I wasn't even willing to put that in. I'm like that, so
That's
it's
funny.
just, but then, you start understanding the impact these things have. And it's like, well, that's
Yeah.
actually not asking me that much to do. It's just different. And so now I have to kind of restructure what I'm used to, and change is hard. Change is hard. So
Well, yes. No, I like that idea though. And I'm so glad you said that too, about how you weren't willing, because I mean, I know I've been so guilty of that. And we are definitely not the only people on the planet that are guilty of, it could be something as simple as just 1 week. Just try it. Well, if it's not that big of a deal, then why don't you just try it? But anyway, there's something that I was thinking about that I would love for you to maybe touch on. Since you work with women, and women don't tend to necessarily ask for help when they, until they're in desperate need, and even then
yeah.
sometimes not. um for somebody who is suffering with migraines, they obviously do not live on an island by themselves. So my thought and my question is there ways for the people around them to be able to support them?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting choice of words. They're not on an island by themselves, because it sure feels like it. When you're the only
Yeah.
person in your own life that's stuck with migraines, you feel like
Mhm.
you're on an island with yourself. And I think that just kind of opening up those lines of communication and trying to explain that to your loved ones and what that means, it's really hard
Mhm.
for them to grasp because they haven't experienced it. So from the loved one standpoint, the people that I find that are the most successful are the ones that have those supportive family members, right? And,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, we can't change how supportive they are or are not. But for the loved ones that might be listening, being open to the changes that they have to make, because it affects the whole family. If they're changing
Mhm.
their diet, it affects the family's diet. If they're changing the cleaning products they're using, or, they have to go to bed by 10 o'clock because if
Mhm.
they stay up past 11, then they will probably be triggered the next day. So understanding that they have to at some point prioritize themselves over the loved ones in order for them to heal so that they can fill their cup enough to serve others again. Right. And that's really hard for us, especially the women caregivers, to wrap their heads around, because my kids come first. They always come first. And, you know, if I weren't in where, you know, if I hadn't gone through all that prior to my kids, I would probably just be miserable in bed all the time when I wasn't taking care of the kids, you know? And so it can be really hard to just say, you know what, I need today as a mental health, like mommy break day, and give them to your husband. And husbands, like, be willing to allow your wife that chance to just step away from her responsibilities and just do what she needs to do. And I think that's just the best thing, is just being there, and anything they decide they need to do, and then holding them accountable to that. Right. Because sometimes what I see happen is like, they get so frustrated with, you know, all of the different things, and they're trying all these things. And then they're just like, you know what, forget it. It's not working the way that I expected. This is too much work. What am I even doing this for? And it's so easy for the family members to say, you're right. Like, I don't see any change, so we should just stop doing this. And that's, you know, 2 months in. And it's like, you've been dealing with this for 2 decades. In 2 months, you're not going to see amazing changes. So helping hold them accountable, like, they made this decision and they know that this is something that's going to help them, then being there to support them and be like, no, this was a 6-month commitment. We're doing it for 6 months. If we don't see anything at that point, we can reassess if we're quitting or not, but let's see it through. Right. And just really being that rock for them is going to be super important, because, you know, when you're sick, you don't want to do anything. And then they still have to live life and go through all this other, you know, stuff that they're trying to do for themselves to make them feel better. And it's hard. It's hard.
You know, I like that idea of not letting them quit, because it's, especially in Western culture, oh my goodness, it's like we're on to the next so often. And especially because, you know, after living in New York City for so long, it's really like that there, because you just never know what's around the corner, literally. But the thing that I want to say, and that I'm hearing you say too, is and this is what you do, is when you start paying attention, you can see the little things that are happening and changing. So it's not, you know, but you have to be paying attention, because it's so easy to miss the miracles, whether, you know, because like you said, it doesn't necessarily look the way you thought that it would. So if you can keep your eyes open, then you can actually see, oh my gosh, this actually is working.
One of the requirements. One of the requirements in our group is we have our Friday wins, and everybody is supposed to put, it might be super small. That's okay. You know, it might be a beautiful sunset that you enjoyed with your husband on the back deck. Like, that's a win, right? So anytime that you can celebrate those small wins, then that helps kind of keep you motivated towards, okay, these are the moments why I'm doing this work. And then, you know, when they become bigger wins, like I went the full week without a migraine, like those, everybody gets to celebrate with you too, you know? So keeping track, or, you know, I hear people doing gratitude journals and things, and I think that's fantastic. Like, it's so easy to get stuck in the pain and the negative and the depression and all the symptoms that come along with it. And it's so hard to find things to be thankful for. And so if we start working on that, that actually can help bring some joy. And there's actually research on how focusing on positivity and gratitude makes a significant change in pain levels and perceived pain levels and inflammation and cortisol release and fight or flight, you know, responses and things like that. And while we're on that topic, another interesting there's like over 3,000 that I found as I dug into this, but having a healthy spiritual practice across the board lowers blood pressure, lowers blood sugar, improves heart function, decreases stroke and cancer risk, hormone balances, improves sleep. I mean, the list was amazing. I had, you know, a full paper, 3 columns long of all of the things that was effective. And so this is just, you know, regular spiritual practice, whatever that looks like for you, can be a big improver in our stress response again, which again is such a huge piece of that chronic illness and kind of getting unstuck from where we're at. So I like to bring that up as another stress management technique.
It really is. And, you know, it also helps with you not feeling alone.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Because there's always that. But I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I'm always preaching about, mind, body, spirit, how it's all connected, all one. And if one is not fit and healthy, it's going to affect the other parts of you. It's not like in this corner and then I can lock it away.
Absolutely.
It's like a kiddie pool. When you throw something in the kiddie pool, it affects the whole thing.
That's right. Yeah, I was just amazed at the level of research that has been done, and actually, there's a whole new field of science on I think it's called neurotheology, where they're studying the effects of the brain and brain chemistry on religious practices and things like that. So, I just find it fascinating. I've been really digging deeply into that lately. And you're very, very right. We are creatures of spirit. We do have a mind, body, and spirit. And I think that's a major flaw in how Western medicine approaches a person. Now they actually ask about the emotional stuff, right? It's not just the crazy woman who's in hysterics. Now there's actually like, how is your depression? How's your anxiety? That's no longer something that's ignored. But the spirituality part absolutely is. And in fact, there was another study that I read, 83% of people wished that their doctor would talk to them about their spiritual practices because they felt that was such an important part of their health. And, of course, there are others that don't want to, and that's okay. Like, you're allowed to tell your doctor, I don't really want to talk about that. I'm not comfortable with that. And that's okay. But, I would really encourage anybody who's listening to approach their doctor and say, you know what, I'd love to talk a little bit about my spirituality and kind of how that plays a role. And hopefully your doctor's open to talking about it with you, because that's an important piece. And studies are finding that that's an important piece in our healthcare, and it shouldn't be ignored.
And I like the idea of asking for what you want and need, because I think a lot of people, when it comes to the doctor or going to a doctor, they just see the white coat and you know better than me because you went to school for so long. And I'm not saying that isn't true, but you're the master of your own body, and you know you better than anybody else.
Yes. I say that all the time. Nobody will ever know you better than you. So you're the boss in this relationship. They're supposed to be taking what you're telling them and then just understanding the biochemistry that's going on to give you the best support. That's their job. So they better be listening to you, and it's okay to advocate for yourself. And if they're not, it's okay to find another doctor who is, that you feel comfortable.
Thank you.
That therapeutic relationship is extremely important, because if you dread going to your doctor, that's not going to be helpful for you, right? Because then going to the doctor is stressful. Like, it should be, usually my patients, we would sit in there and we would talk. My time management was very bad, because we would sit and just talk, and it was always just so enjoyable to just connect. And, there was always really good feedback there, that they really felt heard and that I listened to them and I cared. And they feel like that made a big improvement in how they responded to their treatments. And again, there are studies that show that that's the case. Like, you respond better when you feel like you have a team of support behind you. So family, yes, but also your doctor too. And I think that's really important for us to keep in mind, and not just settle if we have an option. If you live in a one doctor town, then you got what you got. But now with Zoom and stuff, you've got a lot of other options out there too. That
telemedicine.
That's great.
Telemedicine's a huge deal nowadays.
We can thank COVID for that, at least, right?
Yeah. It's funny because I've been aware of it for so many years from working in addiction recovery, but now it's like this normal thing. And Zoom too. I was aware of Zoom before, and now all of a sudden it's like everybody knows Zoom. It's so funny. But we are running low on time. I'm just curious if there's anything that you would love to share with the audience about maybe, something that isn't widely known about experiencing migraines or how to treat them.
Yeah. How much time do we have? Just so I know.
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. So there's actually a few things that I really love for people struggling with migraines to understand. So I'm going to go through them really quickly. But you can find out more information about these things on my website there. So one is labs. normal labs for migraineurs are not the same range as a normal lab for somebody without migraines. There's actually a ton of research about what your optimal levels should be to help reduce frequency and intensity of migraines. A perfect example is thyroid. The normal thyroid levels that are acceptable in the general population has to be much tighter to have a positive impact on migraines. So when you're told that your labs are normal, they might not be normal. So you would have to ask, are you looking at this through the normal levels for a migraineur? I guarantee you, unless you're seeing a specialist, they're not going to know what you're talking about. All right. So number 2, hormones. If you're a female and you have migraines, I can guarantee you that hormones are a piece of it. Even if you've been tested and told your hormones are level or normal, there is a very wide body of evidence showing that hormones are playing a large role. And it might not just be directly related to the hormones, but it can be indirectly based on how your hormones interact with neurotransmitters, your immune system, and other inflammation, all of that. So one thing that I like to bring to people's attention is the estrogen-progesterone ratio. This is the amount of estrogen you have in relationship to your progesterone. Our ratio should be about 200 to 1 progesterone to estrogen. When people come to see me and we do testing for this, I usually see it in the 10 to 25 to 1 range. Way, way, way low on progesterone compared to estrogen. That's going to be a huge factor for hormones. It can, and it applies postmenopausally, premenopausally, it doesn't matter. So that would be something, it's usually done through functional testing, which is usually urine or saliva. It's not done through blood work. So you might have to find a functional medicine doctor to help you figure that piece out. And then, I had a third one. Yes, food restrictions. So another, the last one that I'll point to is the only thing that we can control when we're really not able to figure out our migraines is our diet, right? When we figure out this food is triggering me, you cut it out and you don't ever want to eat it again. And I get that. But what ends up happening is over time, you remove one thing and then there's a new trigger, and then you remove that and then there's a new trigger. And because that's the way our body works when our gut is not working properly and we have a lot of inflammation. So then suddenly we're seeing people coming into us with, they eat chicken and rice and cucumbers, and that's it. And then we start to deal with the problem of malnutrition. So when we're looking at eliminating migraine triggers, that's super important. But what is equally, if not more important, is working on healing the gut and then expanding your diet again. So if you're kind of coming from this place where you feel like everything you eat triggers you, I would implore you to find somebody locally who can work on helping you to heal your gut and then expanding your diet so that we're able to fight the malnutrition that's occurring as a result of a super strict diet. And that can be really scary to open your diet back up. And, I would encourage, if that's scary for you and this is, hitting home for you, go find a therapist, a counselor, somebody who works with food and, addictions and things like that, because they can really help shift that mindset and help you overcome your fear of re-adding foods back in. So that way you can start to, feed your body again, as you mentioned earlier, Julianne, that, food is medicine. And so I think that that's another thing that a lot of people don't really think about, but it's malnutrition is a very big deal when it comes to migraines and chronic illness in general, because if you don't have the nutrients that your body needs to feel better and to build the things it needs to build to feel good, then you're going to always be stuck in that negative pain cycle.
No, that's beautifully put. Oh my goodness. I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today. It has been an absolute pleasure and you've been a wealth of knowledge. So I appreciate you being here, spending your afternoon.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you. Hopefully you'll come back again soon. I'd love to have you back again.
I would love to.
Fabulous. All right. Well, that is all the time that we have. So we're going to say goodbye and I'll see you again soon. All right, everyone. As I mentioned, it is the end of the show. It is time to go. So I just want to say thank you for watching and we will see you again soon. Enjoy the rest of your week.